Basically, what I want to talk with you guys about today is a larger strategic discussion, and then we're going to end up in the portfolio aspect of this. So, first thing first, we've been talking about converged. Everybody used this term converged infrastructure. This is our definition of converged infrastructure. It is that converged infrastructure is the delivery and consumption of compute, storage, and connectivity as a complete system. Now, if you're familiar with EMC, which I'm hoping most of you actually are, you're going to think about EMC as a storage company, data services company, probably at some level a software company. But going forward, with the inclusion of VCE now, you're going to be looking at us hopefully as a complete system, including all of these aspects. Now, what's interesting in the industry right now is everybody in this room is probably dealing with a few different challenges. And this is what I want to kind of get into strategically with converged infrastructure. The first thing going on in the industry is the fact that you are probably being driven to lower costs in your environment. Spend less on everything, right? But you're also being asked to be more efficient in how you actually manage things and operationalize your environments. The second thing that's out there in the industry that we're tying back to CI is this concept of a software-defined data center. The SDDC is where we take all these technologies from the likes of VMware and OpenStack and all these different players out there, and we actually try to say, you can do everything you want in software, have fun. The problem is, when you actually look at all those software technologies and you try to put them together by yourself, it isn't always the easiest thing. And this is another area that CI is actually going to try and help you in the industry. Now, what I want to do here is really talk to you about what EMC does when it actually designs converged infrastructure on the back end. We have three principles in our engineering organization we look at. They are simplicity, optimization, and flexibility. Now, if you ask us to build you the simplest product known to man, you want a single button push to make that thing just work. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to give you the most flexible thing out there. Because to make it flexible, we have to have hardware configurations that are different software tiers, different features and functionality that one button will never satisfy. So what you're going to find through the portfolio and through our strategy is that we're always going to try to meet these three principles on the back end, but you're going to find varying degrees. Some of our products might be super, super simple for you to deploy and manage. Some of them might be for the people that want that flexibility. You want power of choice of CPU, memory, of data features, of all that other stuff, and other things might be more use case optimized. You want to deploy SAP HANA in some scale-out mentality, and you want the platform to work as best as possible for that use case. You're going to see that as we actually go through the portfolio. Now, before we do that, I want to actually take you through what any good engineering discussion includes, which is a layer cake design. Now, this is not just for EMC. This is actually kind of an industry discussion, but I'm going to throw in the EMC part of this also. Anything that we call converged infrastructure has to actually begin with hardware. If it does not include hardware, it's a software-defined something. Software-defined data center, networking, storage, whatever it is. So in the EMC strategic perspective of hardware, we actually have three paths to market that you're going to see. Our first path to market, you're probably very familiar with. It's where we work with Cisco, and we actually deliver our vBlocks through VCE. So UCS for us is a major go-to-market for a lot of our CI stuff, and we'll talk more about that. A second piece of our market that's actually a little bit newer is what we call commodity or standardized hardware. For many years, EMC has actually been innovating and investing in hardware on the back end. We have our own white box that we've developed with Intel and through Foxconn and many other mechanisms. But most recently, we've actually started to partner up with companies like Quanta. And you're going to start to see a lot of that commodity come through in the majority of our CI portfolio as we go forward. And the third place in hardware that you're going to see going forward is actually in the space of innovation. Forever, EMC has made appliances. You're probably familiar with many of them. Storage arrays, VNX, VMAX, Extreme IO, you name it. In those spaces, we have a 600-person global hardware engineering organization that is continuously working on platform development on the back end. We're going to do the same thing in the CI space on top of UCS, on top of commodity, maybe building some more specialized stuff for the CI space. Now, when you look up to the next layer, we call this the personality layer, or the persona layer. In this layer, our strategy is based on the fact that we love VMware, of course, right? We're one of the parents of VMware. But at the same point, not everybody in the industry is asking for VMware under the covers. Other people are saying, you know what, we really, really want to just stand up KVM because we want to do OpenStack. Can you guys support that for us? Or, hey, we're a huge Microsoft shop. Can you do us a favor and support Microsoft with Hyper-V for us? So going forward, what you're going to find in our portfolio is that we're going to be supporting multiple hypervisors through our portfolio. And different products will support different hypervisors. Some will support one. Some will actually support all hypervisors. Now, there's a really interesting thing that you're probably going to see in this one layer here, which is that EMC has the belief that bare metal installation of operating systems belongs in converged infrastructure. Whenever people talk about converged infrastructure in the industry today, it's always about hypervisors and virtual machines. That's 99.9% of the discussions. Well, that is because the software-defined storage layers that make up a lot of the converged infrastructure space as of today, especially the hyper-converged space, they're actually tied back to a hypervisor to deploy that software-defined storage. EMC has one of the only software-defined storage layers that actually enables bare metal deployment with hypervisors, and that's Scale I/O. So what you're going to see in some of our products is that we're going to support multiple hypervisors as well as bare metal operating system. So you might be able to have a platform like the VX Rack where you can get VMware, Red Hat SUSE KVM, maybe Red Hat SUSE bare metal Linux, as well as Windows and Hyper-V and CoreOS and all these things all deployed on that same hyper-converged rack infrastructure. This is something that we're seeing a demand for from a lot of our customers. Now, alongside those personalities or hypervisors, we also have the data services. And what's EMC very well known for? Obviously, our storage and data services. Well, we have a lot of those. We don't just have one storage layer. We have vSAN from VMware. We have Scale I/O. We have Virtual OneFS from Isilon. We have RP4VM, which is Recover Point in virtual environments. We have all these different data services that you're going to see optimized and deployed within our hyper-converged and our converged portfolios. Now, if you look at these bottom two layers, that right there makes up the majority of the CI and hyper-converged space. But we're not going to stop there. We're actually going to come out and say, you know what? In the CI continuum, why shouldn't you be able to acquire a cloud in a box or a turnkey cloud, whether it's a VMware with vRealize automation or OpenStack? Whatever it is, we're going to have different flavors of turnkey clouds coming out as part of our CI portfolio. And finally, why stop there? Let's go all the way to the application. The end game for anything is actually how we handle, deploy, and manage applications. So why not be able to acquire an entire CI stack where the management of that entire thing is based on the upper layer of a big data environment, or maybe a platform as a service like Cloud Foundry. You're going to see all these things actually being deployed inside of our CI portfolio. Now, of course, if you look at all these layers, anybody can acquire most of this and put them together themselves. But what we're trying to really do here is to give you this simplified, flexible, optimized user experience. Now, because of that, we actually think the magic to what we're actually working on here is not everything on the left, but it's what we call the M&O layer, or management and orchestration. Right? That M&O are the layers that allow for automation, for GUI and management of all the different data services and all those different aspects of the environment. So one of the first things I want to introduce you to is what we call hardware M&O, or hardware management orchestration. For anybody that went out to EMC World this year, this was actually brought up briefly in some of Chad's discussions and a few of the other discussions that went on out there, but we have a project internally that we call OnRack. OnRack is actually a set of technologies that we're developing inside of EMC that will actually be a part of the VX Rack day one and then moving into other parts of our CI portfolio moving forward. What OnRack is OnRack is the concept of a management and orchestration layer specifically for heterogeneous hardware. See, EMC has a problem in our portfolio. Our problem has been that we've partnered with tons of different server and storage vendors over the years. We've partnered with Dell, with HP, with Cisco, with Quanta, with Intel and Foxconn, that all of a sudden, if you look at our storage portfolio under the covers, every time we have a new thing come out, we have to develop a new management layer for that because it's different type of BIOS and different type of interaction with that platform. What the promise of OnRack is going to deliver to you is the flexibility and the agility for us to have a single management layer that's API driven, that you'll never see, by the way, it's under the covers, but it will allow us to manage BIOS and firmware, RAID controller, NIC controller configurations, OS and hypervisor installations, upgrades, downgrades, and swap outs, all those things that impact that hardware, but it will be one layer of software developed in a very Platform 3 scale-up mentality that will be embedded inside of the majority of our CI platforms going forward. Now, if you didn't think that was cool, you're not a hardware geek like me, because I love this part of the thing. This is really one of the meetup. If you understand it, this is great. But the real trick to this that we believe is this is not something you will buy. We are actually going as far as looking at open sourcing this piece of technology right now, because we believe that this is the thing that will help you automate a lot of your environments, not just our CI stacks, but you can automate across your data centers in the future, networking stacks and compute stacks and everything you want to. So if you have questions on the OnRack piece, feel free afterwards. We can talk more about it, or we can follow up with the head also in the future. Now, after the hardware M&O, we actually have this next layer called infrastructure M&O. If you're familiar with converged infrastructure stacks, this tends to be that GUI that you're going to use to manage it, or the set of APIs that you manage that platform. This layer right here is where you're going to see us converging our user experience inside of VMC for you. We want you to be able to deploy our different types of CI and hyperconverged over the years from a standardized, simplified set of user experience GUIs and APIs. And there's a lot of work going on in this space right now, specifically focused on things like vSpecs and VxRack moving forward. Now, when you start to go up layer, the next thing up here is multi-cloud. And this is actually a little bit more of a research and development discussion. But for the organizations here that actually are looking at, hey, you might have a vRealize automation type of installation going on here, and you might have OpenStack running in a lab. As soon as you try managing both VRA and OpenStack in the same time, the same environment, you have to manage everything twice. Images are managed twice. Security, user authentication is managed twice. Service levels are managed twice. Why shouldn't there be a way to manage multiple clouds in your environment and tie that back to that turnkey cloud mentality? We're doing a lot of research in this space. And finally, in the application management and orchestration area, we are focused very heavily on Cloud Foundry. If you're not familiar with Cloud Foundry was born out of VMware and EMC through Pivotal and then open sourced out into the Linux Foundation. And this is basically a platform as a service. This is a way for you to now move into the mobile deployments, the Platform 3 cloud type of deployment, but do it yourself on site, or do it yourself with some other partners out there. Now, the trick to CI is the fact that there's no one answer to converged infrastructure, right? Everybody sitting in this room, you guys have thousands of applications that you probably manage, and I bet you're all definitely not the same, right? On the back end of that, you have hundreds of different workload profiles for all those applications. They all use CPU different, memory different, they use data services different, all those aspects of it, right? And on top of that, because every business is different in this environment, then how can there be one type of converged infrastructure or hyperconverged infrastructure? And this is a premise that we use internally when we actually build out the CI portfolio that we're actually going to talk about today. The other thing that I want to make sure that this is our stance from an EMC perspective is that you use the term converged infrastructure. And by the way, this is debated all the time in the industry between all the startups and everybody out there, but this is our stance on it. Converged infrastructure itself is not a type of CI. That's kind of an oxymoron. CI equals CI. That doesn't work, right? CI, if you break it down, is actually made up of multiple types of converged infrastructures. Integrated infrastructure, where you take all those disaggregated pieces of UCS and VNX and VMAX and switches and you bring them together like a VBlock. Or hyperconverged, where you use commodity-based and you deploy software defined on top of it. And there's a future we're moving into that is called disaggregated hardware. If you're not familiar with disaggregated hardware, we don't have time, unfortunately, today to talk about it. But realistically, what it means is where we blow apart servers and you're able to acquire CPU and memory separately from 2U chassis every single time. It's a very flexible and agile way of looking at hardware. It's almost composable hardware down to a very micro level. And that's going to bring up another type of CI in the future. Now, there's an interesting quirk that a lot of people look at, but I think people glaze over when they look at converged infrastructure. If you look at everything on the left is what we call scale up, or maybe traditional platform 3 applications. We've all been running these for years, Exchange, SQL, Oracle, you name it. These are the applications that every time you want to give Exchange more horsepower, give it more CPU and memory, more disk, and let the thing keep growing. But it's dependent on the underlying layers for its data features and data services. Whereas you look on the right, we have scale out. Platform 3 is another acronym that people use for this, another term. Here's the interesting thing. In the scale out world, there are 2 types of scale out, and people don't actually break this down properly. There are what we call linear scale out workloads. These are the workloads that are happy every single time you want to scale it, you're going to give it another node, probably commodity hyperconverged thing, of CPU, memory, disk, and network. But what if that workload actually doesn't always want to get another VMware license and doesn't want more CPU and more memory? It just wants another 24 terabytes of disk. But you want to deploy in a hyper-converged, commodity-based, software-defined way, right? That's where the non-linear scaling discussion comes in. And day one, with our hyper-converged portfolio in VxRack, we are going to be solving that problem for you to allow you to scale a hyper-converged mentality in a non-linear fashion. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, I want you to sit back and kind of evaluate yourself for 1 second. Because what we've found is that in the industry, there are 3 types of people and/or organizations. And as you look at the CI industry as a whole, whether it's our portfolio, startups, whoever it is, depending on where you fall in these different areas are where you should be looking at the products that are out there. So the first set of people that are out there are what we call traditional IT people. This is where your organization is actually made up of siloed teams of the network people are over there, and the storage people are over here, and the server people are over there, and everybody works happily together. But in reality, what if you brought in a product that does everything in one box? How do you divide up that functionality amongst all these siloed groups of people? It's not an easy discussion. We have it all the time with people. That is the first state of people when they start looking at CI is, how do we deploy our IT a little bit more efficiently, but I still want segmentation of who controls storage, who controls networking, who controls servers and hypervisors? Well, then there's the middle group of people that probably people are now transitioning into. You're crossing that chasm right now. You're moving over to IT transformation. In the IT transformation discussion, what's happening here is you basically said, you know what, those silos, they don't work as well for me anymore. I really want to become more efficient at how we manage things. I still love my Platform 2 applications. I'm going to keep those around forever. I'm not rewriting everything in some weird cloud Platform 3 thing yet. But just help me manage everything more efficiently. Get me into that operational efficiencies discussion. And that's that middle group of people right there, where what we found is the majority of people are split between traditional IT and IT transformation right now. But then there's this third group of people. This third group of people have made that either mental leap or organizational leap to basically what we call application transformation. These are the people that said, you know what? I don't want to manage IT anymore. I don't want to know about LUNs. I don't want to know about snapshots and replication. I just want my IT stuff to work, and I want to deploy everything at this application-centric perspective. I want to have a GUI that lets my developers deploy X, Y, and Z and check off any boxes they want, and everything behind the scenes just works. Right? It's almost that promise of cloud, but it's taken to that DevOps mentality that Gene actually spoke about this morning. So depending on how you look at an organization, either you're a single person in a larger organization in one of these buckets, or you can actually measure your entire organization inside one of these buckets. It depends on how you guys are actually broken out. Now, with that being said, EMC actually is going and positioning our portfolio in this new methodology. So let me explain what that means. We have this first grouping of things that we're now going to call blocks. When we actually look at blocks, and we're going to break these down technically on the next slide, but these blocks are what we call integrated infrastructure. These are for the people that are in that IT traditionalist kind of mentality, right? They want to consume storage and servers and networks kind of separately, but they want them delivered in a converged way. But their principles that they're dependent on are resiliency, their latency, things that they're worried about their Platform 2 apps just working as best as possible. And these are what I like to call our proven applications, on top of our proven blocks and products in the back end. Then we have the second set of converged infrastructure stuff that, as we've heard many times today, these are our appliances. The appliances, from an EMC perspective, are going to be aimed at hyper-converged mainly, and if not only. This is where we want to deliver to you the simplest user experience possible. Maybe that one-button push type of mentality. But these are the things where you should just be able to deploy them when you need them as simply as possible, and the acquisition of them should be easy, not just the deployment and the management. These are what we're going to term our simple set of products. And now we have this third grouping of things that we're calling racks. Now, as we go through our portfolio discussion, including our very long-term vision, which if you guys want, we can get into that some other day, the racks discussion is actually where we say, you know what? There are people that want that commodity software-defined world. They want to be extremely flexible in how they deploy their Platform 2-like applications, but they want that to come in an extremely fungible, flexible way. They want to support multi-hypervisor. They want to support multiple types of hardware configurations. They want all these things, but they just want it delivered in an appliance-ish-like fashion with networking and racks and all the other stuff integrated in. Well, when we look at the actual positioning of that, we're finding that in the enterprise data center service provider space, these types of customers lean more towards the left, and the appliance people tend to lean a little bit more towards the right. Not saying you can't cross, you definitely can. But depending on the organization makeup, that's where people tend to lean right now. Now, if we break down the actual architecture of these, what a block actually is under the covers is where we take networking switches like the Cisco Nexus switches. We merge them with UCS, where you get CPU, memory, network ports all in those servers. We merge them with our storage products. We wrap those inside of a rack with some management tools. Now, in the blocks world, we're not giving you that one-button, simplified GUI experience, because these are still the organizations that have the networking team and the storage team and the security team and the server team, and they want to manage them in a little bit more of a CI fashion. These will come to you purpose-built from the factory, pre-configured with all your IP addresses and your users, and all that stuff will come from the factory to help streamline your deployment at your site, so you don't have to have 10 guys on site for 3 weeks to be able to get that up and running. But I'm talking at massive scale. I'm talking with giant VMAXs, with 100 servers, and we'll deliver that to you purpose-built with service and support from the factory. But when we get into the appliances discussion, where the appliances come in is the fact that this is where people want commodity, standardized hardware like we talk about. They will always come with CPU, memory, disk, and network, just not network switches. This is the difference here. This is where you're going to get that simplified IT management GUI wrapping around the commodity software-defined discussion. And what I mean by simplified IT management GUI, this is where you get the GUI and the APIs that allows you to manage your storage things, and your data services things, and your virtual machine things, and your network things. But it doesn't take it up to that higher level abstract. What happens there is, this is where we actually are coming out with our racks. And what you're going to find in our racks portfolio is that we're taking the best of both worlds and we're merging them together. We're taking the concept of commodity-based, software-defined, all that fun stuff. We're going to put that inside of racks with network switches. Because one of the differences you're going to find is, if you try scaling out appliances on your own, you're not going to always be successful. There are a lot of gotchas and architectural discussions that happen when you want to reach hundreds of servers. And in the appliance world, if you have to go do all your own networking for that, you're not getting that fully converged, optimized experience, which is what we're going to deliver to you in racks. But the other difference you're going to find through the racks is that we're actually going to deliver to you more of a simplified business management GUI, not just an IT management GUI. Imagine we come at you with a GUI that allows you to designate your different organizations inside your company. You have finance, you have development, you have engineering, whoever it is. And that is how you manage things. You can say, I want a finance thing with this many resources, go and do it. And that is the way that we're actually approaching the racks discussion, is to give you more of an abstracted business-centric point of view. But it's going to be delivered to you, purpose-built, not just an appliance mentality. Appliance comes to you, you have to go through the wizard, configure it for yourself. Not a big deal if we've done it right, and we will. But with the racks, it'll save you just that much more time, because if you want to do that appliance thing for hundreds of servers, forget the network, now you got to keep clicking those buttons and doing all the configurations. Even wizard-driven, it's still going to take a while on hundreds of servers when you scale this thing out. So that's where the rack architecture actually comes in. So the way that our portfolio works out, and this is officially my last slide, inside of the blocks, our proven category, we actually have three things that are out there. We have our vSpecs reference architecture that you heard a little bit about before. And this is the DIY of converged infrastructure. We'll give you the formula, we'll give you the recipe. Ahead can help you with that formula and recipe, and you can stand it up on your own if you want to. Or you can come back to EMC and VCE and say, I really need a V block. I just want all those things together. Or maybe I want a VX block. Where a VX block comes in is the concept that we might add some variability to V blocks over time. We might throw in, like NSX is the vehicle that you're going to use with a V block today. If you want UCS with Cisco switches, but you don't want ACI, you want something like NSX, that's where the VX block will come in. Next up in the appliance space today, this is our simple category, we have vSpecs Blue. If you're not familiar with vSpecs Blue, this is based on the Evil Rail variation coming out of VMware. And this is our vSAN-based, VMware-based, hyper-converged appliance. This is the simplest thing you will pretty much ever see come out of EMC. It is that push button, 10 minutes, you're up and running type of experience. You don't have a lot of flexibility in the hardware today for what you deploy. It is a black box. You almost can't care, even though most of us do care what comes in it. So this is the box that you say, I just need 40 virtual machines up and running with this profile. What do you got? Oh, here's a box. Great. Keep going. Right? So that's not right for everybody, but there are a lot of customers that actually buy into that, and they want that. You're going to see more appliances coming out of EMC and VCE over the next few years. Third up is what I call flexible. This is our previously announced at EMC World VX Rack 1032. That number is key because the VX Rack is now going to be a whole lineup of products, not just one product. So the VX Rack 1032 is our Scale.io hyper-converged rack. This is what you'll be able to acquire with commodity hardware that's going to have different hardware under the covers, different variations. You'll have a 2U4 node that if you're a hardware guy, 2U, 4 servers inside of it. It's going to be like dual socket Haswell, 12 DIMMs per node. It's going to come from the factory with support for multi-hypervisor. VMware, Red Hat and Red Hat and SUSE KVM, Red Hat and SUSE bare metal Linux day one. You can have any of those with Scale.io on top of it. And in the very near future, we're going to add Microsoft, bare metal Windows with Hyper-V, and then Core OS right behind that. So this is the platform that if you want to acquire a 2U4 node day one that comes all VMware and say, you know what, I really want to get rid of some of my other Windows servers and I want to pull them into my CI thing, you can reload Windows onto these and place a KVM all through that on-rack and management GUI that we're going to actually deliver to you here. The other thing is you'll be able to get a 2U1 node, which instead of a 2U4 node, 2U1 node is a standard 2U server, dual socket Haswell. But this one actually has 24 drives and 24 DIMMs inside of it. So this one can go ultra dense on memory and disk drives. Now the nice thing with this is you're going to have variability. You're going to get to choose. Do you want more storage or more CPU? What are the ratios you want? Because that is an architectural discussion that everybody in this room has different needs for. That's how the VX Rack's been designed. And the third thing that you'll be able to acquire in that VX Rack is a storage-only node. So besides getting that 2U4 node and 2U1 node with a hypervisor or bare metal OS and Scale.io, you can get a 2U standalone 24-drive server, single CPU, 64 gigs of memory that will come with just Scale.io, stripped-down version of Linux that is only meant to expand the storage of everything else inside of that cluster. Now, the really cool thing with this is because it's Scale.io based, this thing is going to scale up to thousands of nodes. Literally, out of the box, it today supports 1,000 nodes of scalability inside what we call a protection domain. So this is pretty much the only software-defined storage solution out there that has the ability to meet your enterprise data center software-defined scalability needs. where you don't have to create little silos and pools of 50 servers, 40 servers, but you want 200, go at it. You want 500, go at it. That's how this thing is actually designed and will actually help you out of the box. Now, with that being said, there's one more thing that you will be seeing coming out. This is more forward-looking. If you're familiar with Chad Sakich, by the way, he's president of pre-sales at EMC. He has a great blog, virtualgeek.typepad.com. He shows you in-depth blog entries on all this stuff, including this last column. This last column is what we call Turnkey. With Turnkey, what you're actually looking at is you're actually looking at the Evo Rack from VMware, which has been in tech preview since last VMworld. This is VMware software-defined data center in a box. This is where if you want to acquire everything in the entire VMware stack, vSAN, vSphere, vCenter, vCops, including vRealize Automation, NSX on white box servers with white box switches, rack-based, that can scale to multi-rack, that is what that is. So you, in less than a day, Turnkey can have a infrastructure as a service up and running, or someday soon platform as a service with Cloud Foundry on it, or with the Horizon suite for VDI in a box. And finally, what we call Project Caspian is the last thing. And this is where EMC is actually working on. Part of our future is our open source based OpenStack distribution that we're looking to get you a rack scale, commodity based, OpenStack, true open source based thing that under the covers comes with Scale IO. It comes with SUSE KVM that you won't be able to modify. It's an appliance-ish mentality, so you shouldn't care. But it is a fully working version of OpenStack on top of that as one of 3 personalities. The second personality besides OpenStack that's kind of aimed at that AWS EC2-like mentality but on-site. If you want to simulate AWS EC2 but at your data center, that is where you're going to be aiming probably from a cost perspective. That's what that's aiming at. The second personality is the big data in a box, or big data personality, where it will come with Hortonworks or Pivotal Hadoop on top of it. Again, a Pivotal cluster up and running in less than a day on the exact same hardware with the exact same M&O. That's on top of that. And the third thing is our object storage based on ECS.